The 10th insight of the Celestine Prophecy series, Chapter 9, Remembering the Future. This chapter outlines how the transformation will happen. It's too much to describe step by step, so I'm cherry-picking the parts I wanted to share that fit my agenda. And as always, I encourage you to read any book that I review. There's a lot more detail in this chapter that I will be covering. Disruptive technology. You want to centralize the generating process so you can control it. That's not right. Do you think we can go overnight from energy being a substantial part of household and business costs to practically nothing? The sudden disposable income throughout the world would cause hyperinflation and then probably a massive reaction that would cast us into a depression. You know that's not true. Reduced energy costs would increase the efficiency of production tremendously, supplying more goods at lower costs. No inflation would occur. You're doing this for yourself. You want to centralize the production so you can control its availability and price despite the dangers. As you know, disruptive technology and releasing the black-shelved, suppressed technology is part of my agenda of this channel, as well as an agenda of the 9th insight, that is the automation of society to free up our time so we can go about our lives on our adventures. The powers that be won't allow it. That's naive. Do you think the interests that act to control energy prices now would allow a sudden, massive shift to an inexpensive source? Of course not. It has to be centralized and packaged to work at all. And I'm going to be known for having done this. If you haven't heard my series on the Grunch of Giants or my playlist on artificial scarcity examples, please check those out after viewing this video. The polarization. One pushing towards a vague but ever clearer image of transformation, and the other resisting, sensing that important values contained in the old worldview were being lost forever. Both sides would entrench into an irrational projection of evil onto the other, or worse, might believe the literal interpreters of the end times prophecies and begin to think the coming future was beyond their influence and therefore give up completely. What's interesting about this polarization is in present day, the polarization's out of control right now politically. And also to keep in the context of the times, this came out in the 90s, so the end times prophecies were still going strong because we hadn't quite hit Y2K yet. But yeah, the polarization, it's amazing. 20 years divide this. The polarization now has been super amplified, but also it talks about the coming, people think of the coming future was beyond their influence and giving up completely if they believe the end times literally. If you've seen the movie Tomorrowland, the Dr. House character talks about how people used to be filled with hope and now they were filled with fear. And the hope was that humans would build something and try to fix the future because of the fear that was pushed. But I guess the fear they pushed was too tremendous and people just gave up and just were either waiting for God to return or just waiting for the apocalypse to happen. World vision and polarization resolve. Discern the deeper truths of these prophecies. Visions were divine intuitions coming from the afterlife into the physical plane, and so must be understood as draped in the symbolism of the seer's mind, much like a dream. We should focus on the symbolic meaning. The prophecies envisioned an eventual end to the human story on earth, but an end that, for believers, would be quite different from the one experienced by non-believers. The dual apocalypse. The one experienced by the non-believers. Non-believers experience an end of history that would begin with great catastrophes and environmental disasters and collapsing economies. At the height of the fear and chaos, a strong leader would emerge, the Antichrist, who would offer to restore order, but only if individuals would agree to give up their liberties and carry the mark of the beast upon their bodies in order to participate in the automated economy. Eventually, this strong leader would declare himself a god and take by force any country that resisted his rule, at first making war on the forces of Islam, then on the Jews and Christians, ultimately casting the whole world into a fiery Armageddon. The dual apocalypse as experienced by the believers. The scriptural prophets predicted a much more pleasant end to history. Remaining true to the Spirit, these believers would be given spiritual bodies and be raptured into another dimension called the New Jerusalem, but would be able to travel back and forth into the physical. Eventually, at a certain point in the war, God would fully return to end the fighting, restore the earth, and implement 1,000 years of peace, where there would be no sickness or death, and everything would be transformed, even the animals of the world, who would no longer eat meat. The wolf shall dwell with the lamb, and the lion shall eat straw like the ox. Now, I know there's a lot of different translations of that line. Two futures. Future 1, languish in the fear, believing that the world is moving into a Big Brother style of automation and social decay and ultimate destruction. Or Future 2, follow the other path and consider ourselves the believers who can overcome this nihilism and open to the higher vibrations of love, where we are spared the apocalypse and can enter a new dimension in which we invite the Spirit through us to create just the utopia the scriptural prophets envisioned. What we think and believe matters. If we decide the end of the world is inevitable, then we might create this outcome. The duality, the polarization. The dual legacy of ideals. The polarization was not supposed to be so severe. Each side represented a part of the truth that could be integrated and synthesized into the new spiritual worldview. This synthesis would be a natural outgrowth of the insights themselves, especially the 10th insight, and of the special groups that would begin to form all over the world. And what was unanticipated was how polarization became the primary business model of the media, driving people farther and farther apart, dividing, whether it's political parties, genders, race, all that stuff. They continuously divide via the media. Polarization is the business model. The synthesis. Remembering how we intended to become believers and accomplish this prophesied utopian future. Remembering the world vision. The world vision process. 10th insight groups forming all over the planet, reaching a critical mass of energy. Learning to project this energy in such a way that the entrenched sides of the polarization immediately begin to lighten and ease, overcoming the fear. Technological controllers would give up their last efforts to manipulate the economy and seize power. The end result? An unprecedented wave of awakening and remembrance and cooperation and personal involvement. A virtual explosion of newly inspired individuals, all of whom would begin to fully recall their birth visions and follow their synchronistic path into exactly the right positions within their culture. Ending poverty. No longer government programs, jobs, education as the answer. New approach is deeply spiritual, for the structures of education were already in place. What was missing was the ability to break free from the fear and overcome the hellish divisions set up to ward off the anxiety of poverty. A surge of private outreach surrounding each family and each child in need. Personal relationships and communities. This was one of those sections that was expanded on a lot farther. To me, I was like, hey, you want to end poverty? Just end artificial scarcity, release the suppressed, and advance technology. As the contagion of memory spreads, violent crime decreases, we find new ways of rehabilitating criminals, conflict management improves, all people stop polluting the environment, and because people no longer need job security, they'll report anyone who is polluting. No more fake research, no more government selling off enchanted lands for pillaging, the rainforest is saved, and all sites of beauty preserved. As the contagion spreads to the health industry, it moves from treatment to prevention and cures. Go back to the cures. Cure diseases, but also prevent them, but no longer just treat and use people as cash cows. Enlightened Capitalism Revisited. From a previous chapter they discussed Enlightened Capitalism. The best products at the lowest costs, produce a grassroots deflation, initiate a systematic evolution toward an eventual full automation, and ultimately the free availability of the basic necessities of life, liberating humans to engage in the spiritual tithing economy envisioned in the ninth insight. See, right now they have a grassroots inflation every year inflation occurs about roughly 3%. Usually it's more, but it's pretty much reported at 3%. The prices always go up. What if they all organized for the prices to come down? And they could, if those energy sources come out, to make the cost of manufacturing goods near zero. People remember their missions. People at younger ages recall their birth visions and their purposes they chose from another dimension to bring to Earth. Teachers and parents encourage and guide the youth to remember and teach the techniques of synchronicity. A better world order. World peace achieved not by forcing everyone into the one world order, but by everyone acknowledging that we are all here to fulfill a purpose. We all cherish and appreciate each other's religions and customs and learn from each other's knowledge and gifts. Integrate all religions together, much like mathematics includes all of the disciplines. The new currency, the sharing of spiritual truth. Observe the apocalypse as symbolic and not literal, and will create a new heaven, a new earth, and the knowledge transfers from the afterlife dimension into the physical are currently done from the afterlife to the physical, but eventually this responsibility will shift to the inhabitants of Earth. And in order to carry the intention from the afterlife, we need to resolve the polarization and end the fear, as well as overcome those who feel justified in manipulating the economy for their own purposes, justified in seizing control of the future. Basically ending artificial scarcity, releasing the technology that's been suppressed and black shelved. And Maya dodged bullets. There was a scene where some bullets were fired at Maya and she was saved by the white light. She said, "I saw this strange streak of light. It seemed to calm me in a way I've never experienced before." And I recall being saved by that as well, although I don't remember any white light. But I remember I was riding one of my bikes when I was a little kid. It was like the second bike I ever owned, the second like two-wheeler bike. And I was trying to ride it as fast as I could. And I was like riding faster than my legs have ever gone. And I just kind of like have missing memory where I just blacked out and wound up like it appears as if I flew into a tree, but I didn't have any pain. And I don't remember hitting the tree, but I remember just waking up with the bike on the ground and me under the tree as if I like splat right into it. I'm envisioning it right now as it happened. So I don't know how it happened, but somehow I was protected on that impact. And there's so many examples of people talking about near-death experiences they had, or collisions or crashes or accidents, the sole survivors. I had a friend that his car was thoroughly totaled and he came out of it without even a single bruise on. So there are angels out there. There's some kind of force that protects some of us. And there's plenty of examples of that. Anyway, that wraps up Chapter 9 of the 10th Insight, and I'll see you on Chapter 10.